to the Division for Diversity and Inclusion's Shattering the Silences series. My name is Dr. Ken Coopwood, and I'm the Vice President for Diversity and Inclusion here at Missouri State University. This series is a year-round effort to help educate, give credence and voice to important topics for our campus, its divisions, its departments, groups, and individuals. We need these forums to discuss local, regional, and national matters that are important to us. We do not want to be silent about such things, but instead we want to speak up and speak out with the intention to help dispel myths and to inspire truth. But mostly, the series is designed to bring our campus together for unified service to our students and to each other. Thank you for joining us. Now, let's turn our attention to the topic of this video.
Types of perception of reality. We have a great changing dynamic in our country, but when I do any kind of diversity development or diversity opportunities, I like to start off with some basic ground rules, in case once we get discussion towards the end. Some basic ground rules: be fully present. Okay, be here, turn off your cell phones, unless we're expecting an emergency call from somebody. Be self-responsible for changing. Okay, as a division, we're not here to change you, we're here to help you. And that's the biggest thing you need to know. Listen, and then respond. Oops, respond. Lead into discomfort. Some of this stuff might be foreign to you. Some of you are like, well, I never thought about it that way. You think, well, I'm a little bit uncomfortable. That's why we have the open discussion. Experiment with new behaviors. Okay, you're the only one that can change. It starts with a database of one. Okay, so a lot of this stuff might seem funny, some might seem serious, but it starts with you and the way you process it. Experiment with new behaviors. Take risks, be ragged, and then let go. Some of it is changing your process, changing where you are, changing where you want to be, understanding yourself. Except working through conflict. Sometimes you're going to have that conflict because you come from different backgrounds, different parameters, different upbringing. Be crisp and to the point. A good friend of mine used to speak in paragraphs. I said, you need to speak in bullets. Okay? Be to the point. And be open-minded. Okay, as change is coming. And be soft on people and hard on barriers to understanding. And that's what we're here for, to eliminate these barriers, to really have a true inclusive environment. And on our confidentiality, some people may be sharing things that are very personal. They may not even get to that point, but it's important that you understand that. So these are some basic rules that we'll try to observe today. Really have a good learning experience. Okay, talking about cultural stereotypes, there's a great setup. I learned a lot from cartoons, and my cultural stereotype of the Ozarks is very different. And at the end of the program, I'm going to show you one of my favorite clips from Bugs Bunny. How many of you remember Bugs Bunny? See, that's a great cultural learning piece. But I found this piece on YouTube. Whoopi Goldberg gives an excellent introduction on the effect even of cartoons. It's about 2 minutes long. And,
Hello, I'm Whoopi Goldberg, and welcome to the Looney Tunes Golden Collection. Like many of you, I love cartoons, and I've been a fan of the Looney Tunes since I was a little kid. You know, the best thing about the Looney Tunes is that they represent us, each and every one of us. They're part of Americana, part of our mainstream culture. They become members of our families. I mean, you don't have to go far to find out how close to us they really are. Think about, "What's up, Doc?" Or, "You're despicable." Or, "That's all, folks." These are phrases we all know, spoken by characters we recognize and understand. Probably because most of the time, they're more human than we want to give them credit for. And I think that's why they're true American treasures.
Gracias, pussycats.
However, the Looney Tunes and their irreverent brand of humor are products of their time. Unfortunately, at that time, racial and ethnic differences were caricatured in ways that may have embarrassed and even hurt people of color, women, and ethnic groups. Now, nobody intended it, but that's what happened. Now, some of the cartoons here reflect some of the prejudices that were commonplace in American society, especially when it came to the treatment of racial and ethnic minorities. Now, these jokes were wrong then, and they are wrong today. But removing these inexcusable images and jokes from this collection would be the same as saying they never existed. so they are presented here to accurately reflect a part of our history that cannot and should not be ignored. But I also want to point out that the Looney Tunes were made by the studio that supported hiring the first black animator, Frank Braxton, and that encouraged women voice artists like June Foray to become as recognizable as their on-screen characters. All that said, there's only one original, and we are so proud to present the Looney Tunes here for their enduring entertainment value, uncut and restored, just as they originally appeared. So sit back, enjoy the following collection of shorts. And I must tell you personally, I think Porky never looked so good. Beep, beep.
So sometimes we never realize where these stereotypes come from. Talking about what are cultural stereotypes? That's a general belief about a group of people. Okay, it may not be your belief, it might be somebody else's belief, something that you've heard. And it differs from prejudice that can have a positive or negative connotations. It can affect a whole group of people, it can affect an individual in a conversation, it could affect even sometimes maybe your leadership style. And it runs a risk of becoming prejudicial and leading to discrimination. How do we measure stereotypes? Okay, what do we look at? What are the changes? Do we hear these? As an institution of higher learning, what do we see when our students walk in the door? As we have new staff members, as we have new administrators, what is this perceived stereotype that you already have in your head? Okay, where did you learn it from? Everything is learned. They're learned traits. You're not born with these traits. Okay, and how are we affected by it? You naturally see something, oh, that person might be dangerous, or that person might be this or that or the other, because that's the way the perception is shaped. They seem to be a function of automatic processing, okay? And that goes through the cognitive piece of your brain, that you learn somehow that this is the way I'm going to process this information. Environment plays a role. That could be your development when you grew up, okay? We just saw an announcement of a cartoon. That was part of the environment. I remember all those cartoons very well. Not knowing this is going to be part of my long-term learning, because when you're young, you don't perceive it that way. You think, well, this is funny, this is awesome. You know, even automatic process can be overcome with controlled processing, that we have to sometimes unlearn these stereotypes. What are the sources of cultural stereotyping? Especially as we look at higher education, okay? How many of you remember the Compton Cookout? Anybody remember that one? That's only about 4 years ago, okay? And this happened in the San Diego area, the UC San Diego system, where the attendees were urged to dress in an accurate manner that school officials had perpetuated racist stereotypes. And this was promoted on Facebook. Okay, a lot of our students spend a lot of time on Facebook to participate as ghetto chicks, serve chicken, watermelon, and malt liquor. Okay, this created a huge backlash on that institution to the point where the president left his position. You know, so we need to understand these things that are coming in. And especially as we tie it into the changing demographics, which is the key point of this presentation. Our whole society is changing, our demographic numbers are changing, okay? Some of you, I think, hopefully did the 5 questions on the pre-test, and one of them talked about the white population increase at a slower rate than any other group, and that's very true, okay? So it's increasing in that changing demographic position. Another, this was more recent, this was about a month ago at Columbia College. They called it the Beer Olympics. Once again, photos posted on Facebook, and this is a particular group, and they dressed in different cultural groups, which can be very offensive. Instead of saying a celebration of a culture, it highlighted those stereotypes again. And the one that picture that I put in, I'll go back to it. They dressed up as Mexicans. I've never worn a sombrero like that in my life. I was born in Mexico, so those are for tourists. But if you look at the population of our country here, more than half the growth of the total population of the United States between 2000 and 2010 was the Hispanic population. That's the fastest growing number. Even as an institution, we're looking at it strategically in the state of Missouri, the fastest number of growing students graduating from high school is the Hispanic or Latino population, okay? So that phase is already hitting. and it's going to continue to grow. And when they say, well, multiply, we don't mess around. Social learning. Many of our attitudes are formed in the home. Okay, it's very important to understand what that dynamic is. I've had conversations even with some of our staff that the way we raise our children is very different. In the Latino culture, it's always, you always tell the student, they tell us, well, go dale el beso, go give them a kiss, go give them a hand, give them a hug. Where here it's more distance related. So if a Latino student has to grow up here, they know to keep their distance, and it's a handshake. It's not quite as close. We're very close, we're very huggy type people. Parents are an enormous source of influence. I love that one. I love the Devils. The Tasmanian Devils crack me up, but there's a big influence coming from the family and how they were raised and their own background, their own structure, you know, even their own cultural background. Peers, okay, colleagues, friends also shape our attitudes. As we evolve as an institution, our peers that we work with, other faculty, other staff, and especially our student population that's changing. Our diversity numbers have grown every year over the last decade, and they're going to continue to change. As I stated earlier, that diverse population is going to grow and grow from now on. There's no looking back. It's happening. It's not going to happen. It's already here. Then you can have an authoritative personality which favors obedience, avoids lower status people, which is contributed to by our upbringing. Okay, well, you're better than those people, and watch out for those people. Tomorrow, for the Public Affairs Conference, if you go hear the student presentation, the group that I'm working with, they're talking about the new face of homelessness, the homeless people in Springfield, and they did a poll on students on this campus and their perceptions. And they put a very powerful video together, and I hope that you can make it. I'm not going to give it all away because it's very impressive what our students do. And they're often way ahead of where we are because they're asking for things that we should have in place. They're the leading voice. Cognitive sources. Okay, now let's get to the brain. Dividing people into categories based on common attributes. Well, you come from here, or you come from there, or you value this, or you value that. Race, gender, or other common features. Okay, you look at somebody and you think, this is my perception of that person. This is my stereotype that I know. Do you speak loudly and slowly to a Latino person without thinking about it? Well, how are you? Are you from this country? I was born in Mexico, but I think my English is pretty good. Now, I speak loudly and slowly to my mom, but she's 94 and she only has 20% here in one ear. So, you know, it depends on the situation. And are we instinctively drawn to categorize based on difference? Okay, we have a lot more similarities than we do differences. Okay, and that's one thing that we need to consider as we evolve as an institution. In group favoritism, the we, us versus they, them mentality. Well, it's us against them instead of we're one big unit. Okay, can lead to discriminatory behavior. The group stated with heavy in-group favoritism. Do you favor a specific group? Do you feel more comfortable, of course, often with people that may look like you, or have the same language, or have the same understanding. And over time, it dissipates. Okay? We become the collective group. Social dominance orientation group should be ordered according to its worth. We all have worth. When you look at the inclusive excellence model, it talks about what everybody brings to the institution. Everybody has value. Together as a whole, we're better than individuals. And what are the consequences of cultural stereotyping? The dangers of cultural stereotyping are many. Influence on our perception of others. Once again, that could be from your upbringing, it could be on things that you've heard, things that you've seen, and they may not be your stereotypes, but you hear them. I'm sure right now, if we took a poll, everybody in here has at least one stereotype of a specific group, a specific race, even a specific age. And as we evolve, you know, where do these come from? It affects our behavior. Does it create a fear right away? There's a great film called Higher Learning. It's built on higher learning, and it starts with an African-American student getting on an elevator and a white female, and as soon as he steps on the elevator, she grabs her purse and steps in the back. And at the end of the movie, these same two people get in the elevator, and she was like, she goes, nice to meet you, and he said, you met me a long time ago, you just don't remember. So that process piece, it kind of shows her evolution through the film, but also that stereotype she had initially, and as she went through the process of developing into an adult at the university level, it really kind of highlighted how much her perception changed and her value of people changed. What are the consequences of cultural stereotyping? Okay, a self-fulfilling prophecy, the belief that causes itself to be true. Some people think, well, you know what? The one that I hate stereotyping for Latinos is like, you guys always run behind on time. This is the land of mañana. That drives me crazy. I like to run punctual on everything that I do because that stereotype's not true. I've never been, I worked in construction with my father, so, if I was up at 7 in the morning, he was on the starting the truck ready to go, so I always learned to run ahead of time. And working also, I work a lot with a band here. I would tell the students, if you're on time, you're late. If you're 5 minutes early, then you're on time. These stereotypes, you really don't want them to become true because then people start assuming that, well, it's okay, I can be late. It can lead to positive or negative behaviors. How might a student or employee perform who is told that she is excellent? You put that in their mind, you're a great person, you're an excellent worker. You give that positive reinforcement as opposed to how might the same student employee perform if he or she is told average. Well, I'm average, I'm not very good. And we often start that at the elementary level when they're young. These kids, they absorb that very quickly. I went through that even growing up with one of my friends. He needed a little more time to learn. He wasn't slow, he just needed more time to process, and we all process at different times. We may inadvertently promote such outcomes based on how we interact with people. How do you interact with everybody? Think about the things that you say, the way you present things, the way you present yourself, and what do the people have the perception of what you are? Everybody builds that perception. What do they think of me? And you need to be very comfortable with yourself, because that's when you know where you are, and you can easily articulate what you want to do and what you want to be and how you want to build your team. Stereotype threat, the risk of confirming a negative stereotype about oneself. Okay? Once again, there's multiple areas of that you could do. And similar to self-fulfilling prophecy. And I love that picture of Bugs Bunny because it shows him in the square dance, but it also shows that cultural piece, that it's a rural hillbilly, And my in-laws said, well, you've lived here longer than you lived in New Mexico, so you're a hillbilly now. I was like, I don't know what that means. How should I process that? But it makes you think, you become more of your own community, but also are you adding to the community? And when we're aware of stereotypes, we might live down to them, okay? And you don't ever want to do that because then you're living down to that stereotype. How can we combat cultural prejudice stereotyping? Increased communication between groups reduces prejudice and discrimination. Once again, having that open communication. Sometimes it can be called a courageous conversation or the uncomfortable conversation. Don't be afraid to ask the question. Tell me about this, because we want to make sure that we have that open area so we can say, well, how can we learn? I'm always looking to learn, and if I say something wrong, I want to know about it, okay? And make sure we have equal contact between the groups. That's also essential. And as we change into the groups, we have different groups that are coming on campus. One of the big things that I talked about that hit on that pre-test was the largest multiple race combination was black and white, and that's in this country. So we're having more and more biracial students that are coming onto campus. So we're changing as a population. And of course, the Asian group grew faster than any other group. If you did that pre-test that I put online, all 5 questions were from the 2010 census, and they were all true. Okay. So if you missed any, that's okay. We all look at that. That's how we learn. Group interdependence, equal status between groups, institutional support for all groups, intergroup cooperation, and the most important one is common goals for all groups. Our common goal here really should to have the best environment for all of us who work here, and especially for our students that come here, because some they're here for a short time, some longer than others. I had one student that made 9 years as a full-time student, but she finally got done. But they're here for a short time. Some of us have been a long time, some of us are short-timers. I've been here 28 years, so I've seen a lot of change, especially the last 5 years, as we really develop more of that environment that's more welcoming, and as we start preparing for the next group of students. One of the data bombs that I like to use is this past July in the census, white children 5 years or younger are no longer the majority. Okay? So guess where those children are going to be in 13 years? They're going to be getting higher education. So we have to be prepared for that changing wave and understand what are our stereotypes. Do we have biases? What do we need to do to really prepare to make this the environment where all are welcome? Okay? Group interdependence, once again, education. It's not enough just to talk about it. People have to participate in order to reduce stereotypes, prejudice, and discrimination. And presentations like this will help you start thinking, and that's the biggest thing. Start thinking, evaluating where you are, and think, well, you know, I never thought about it that way. As we change, as we evolve, you know, we're going to keep on growing as an institution, and the better prepared we are to support each other and support everybody, the better off we're going to be, because it is a very competitive market. Just as the open management, they're like, oh, what do we do with our numbers? Because numbers are changing all the time. And we're selling the experience. What experience are we having? And as faculty and staff, we also have to have a very positive experience, because that will reflect on how we treat our students, how we take care of our students, how we welcome them. We just had a big event on Saturday, and everybody that I spoke to had a very positive interaction. They had a very good visit on campus. I just went with a student at lunch that came here from Puerto Rico with her mom. And she's coming here, she wants to work on her master's degree. So she's coming and checking out our campus. And, you know, where we start getting more of that diversity on campus, are we prepared? Are we ready for it? Now I'm going to show you, let's go back to how I started. This is my favorite, one of my favorite cartoons that, well, not the advertisement. Oops, sorry. Here we go. And the word, if you ever look, the words were on YouTube.
In style.
Promenade across the floor, sashay right on out the door and into the glade, and everybody promenade. Step right up, you're doing fine. I'll pull your bed, you pull mine. Ain't get again like it did before. Break it up with a tug of war. Now into the brook and fish for the trout. Dive right in and splash about. Trout, trout, pretty little trout. One more splash and come right out. Shake like a hound dog, shake again. Wallow around in the old big pen. Oh, wallow some more, you'll know how. Roll around like an old fat sow. Element left with your left hand. Follow through with the right and left grand. Now leave your partner the dirty old thing. Follow through with an elbow swing. Grab a fence post, hold it tight. Whomp your partner with all your might. Hit him in the shin, hit him in the head. Hit him again, the critter ain't dead. Whop him low and whop him high. Stick your finger in his eye. Pretty little rhythm, pretty little sound. Bang your heads against the ground. Promenade all around the room. Promenade like a bride and groom. Open up the door and step right in. Close the door and into a spin. Whirl, whirl, twist and twirl. Jump all around like a flying squirrel. Now don't you cuss and don't you swear. Just come right out and form a square. Now right hand over left hand under. Both join hands and run like thunder. Over the hill and over the dale. Duck your head and lift your tail. Don't you stray and don't you roam. Turn around and promenade home. Corn in the crib and wheat in the sack. Turn your partner, promenade back. And now you're home. Bow to your partner. Bow to the gent across the hall. And that is all.
So I love that cartoon. It cracks me up. I'm back here laughing. I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I did. But you know, that was my perception, my stereotype of the Ozarks, because I didn't know it. When you watch the beginning of that cartoon, it says, well, you know, here I am in the Ozarks, the beauty and the peace and serenity of the Ozarks. So that was when I was in New Mexico. I came here, and now I have a very different understanding. So that's part of my own development. We all have this process that we develop. So I went through it. I spoke pretty fast, so I hope you listened fast. I want to leave plenty of time for questions or discussion, because that way, if you're not sure, we'll try to answer your questions as best I can. If not, then we'll find the information out. So, who's first? Who's first? Who's gonna people? Yes.
Is positive stereotyping okay? Like Asians are smart or good at math, or Hispanics are horrible numbers. Is positive stereotyping?
Yes, sure it is. You know, anybody likes to be called a positive stereotype. That's okay, because in general, it depends, and also depends on how you word it and who you're speaking to. You have to be very comfortable with your audience that you're sharing, you know. But yeah, that perception is oftentimes, yes, that people that come from an Asian background tend to be more disciplined on their studies, so they tend to be better students. Yeah, that's very true.
Why is that? I guess I'm not clear why unequivocally positive stereotypes. Because go back to the Asians are good at math.
Yes.
First off, is an inaccurate positive stereotype? Is that still good?
No, that's why I said it depends on the group,
Well, if
and it depends on the.
It's comparative, so it's not just, it isn't purely positive. If
Right.
Asians are good at math, then that means that whites, blacks, Hispanics
Are not good at math.
So,
Yeah, but that's not saying that they're better than math. That tends to be a trick, that they are generally good. But also, it's like saying women are good cooks. Most of the chefs tend to be both genders. But I understand what you're saying. That it doesn't necessarily make it true. So is that a good stereotype or a bad stereotype? Actually, honestly, really, you shouldn't have a stereotype because it's very individualistic. You can talk, if you look at me, what would you say about, you know, there's an exercise that we do that's called the cultural, well, it's like a cultural picture. And we would go around and write on the board what our stereotypes are, good or bad, okay? And we do this, we do training, we've done it with the chamber, with the leadership of Springfield, and they put down the stereotypes. And most of the times this is Latino, this is, you know, machismo, drugs, gangs, tattoo, of which none of those would apply to me. Okay, farm worker, migrant worker, undocumented. So you're right, and actually that's true. So I retract that statement. There are really no good stereotypes. It's the person. It's the person that you're talking to. You can't, and that's why it says you can't address a whole group. Like all these students here and say, well, all these students, they're great students because they're here. Well, some of them probably get extra credit. Some of them are here to learn. Some of them are going to get a different perspective. So, yes.
follow up and
Sure.
complicate things even more.
Complicated.
As a sociologist, and on the
So,
flip
yeah.
side, you got data backed up, research supported, statistically significant generalizations about certain populations.
Yes.
Which I would argue that's the distinction between a stereotype. So there's generalizations that are based on research as opposed to stereotypes. Now, are they any better and more or less helpful? I mean, it gets tricky.
Yeah, it is tricky, and it also depends on the context that you're putting it in as well. If you're saying, well, we did this study on this specific population, then you're very specific. You're talking about a certain group, could be a controlled group, and you're looking for a different result on the research side, you know, on the academic side. Whereas you look at the employee side, the worker side, theirs is more a functional side. How do we work with everybody? But yeah, the academic piece is very important because sometimes it reinforces some of the things that we talk about university-wide. We are an institution of higher learning, so we do want to have those tools in our back pocket to educate our students, but also put in definition where it's coming from. Yes,
So the problem you come into is if you say all Asians are good at math, what happens if you have someone that's Asian that's not good at math? Do they not consider
Yeah.
themselves?
That makes me feel like, it makes me feel the negative way that I'm not one of the Asians that's good at math.
Right.
I feel left out.
Yeah, she feels that stereotype. Right. And that's when you say, well, you know, that's not me. That's not who I am. You know, and that's very true. I have other scholars that come from an Asian background that they don't like math. They don't want to do math. You know, they want to do something else. They're artistic. You know, very good. Yes.
When I teach about differences between groups, I always tell the class that these are results of research across the group, and that it doesn't apply to any one particular person. I think that's an important piece too.
Speaking of stereotypes, when I went to Africa, I was always under the impression that, you know, people who looked like me had rhythm. I came to find out that was not true. I went to syncopated timings on a music piece, and they were like, "What's that?" So I learned very quickly that that was a stereotype.
That's very true. You know, it's like my Spanish is good, but when I go back to another language, it's like, "Whoa, who's this guy? Ah, watch out!" You know, so I really have to get my brain engaged because it does come at you very differently. You know, when I came here from New Mexico, well, my Spanish was fluid. I go to Mexico and I meet with some of these presidents or the Secretary of Education. They're just like way up here. So I really have to peak my own game because it's a very comprehensive language and we only know part of it. But one of the big things that we look at is also, as an institution, where are we? Okay, that's what we really need to start building, that cohesiveness. Do we have the stereotypes on campus? Do we have these things going on? And what can we do to better ourselves as a campus? Other questions? Good discussion. Good. What about all the students that are in here? Okay.
How do you overcome authoritarian personality? Like, in my opinion, some people have relatively low status, social status. Some people choose to be that way. How do you look at that?
How do we overcome more authoritarian people that are very direct? That's a tough question. A lot of it is having the right environment. And if they're not going to be open to change, you can't change people. You can't modify behavior. You can only modify some of the environment, and it depends what that is like. You know, for you as a person, dealing with something that's authoritarian. Okay, we want to have the best environment at work or as a learning environment, and hopefully we don't have too much of that authoritarianism because we are an open forum as a university. We should be open to anything, even though it may not be our own belief. We should still respect and understand where everybody's coming from and what their values are, because they're going to add to they're adding to our community, but they're also educating all of us as we go. Other questions? Although look who's there calling me.
Okay, so you talked about telling students whether they're excellent or average, how would they perform. How would you go about instilling in schools or families to tell students that they're excellent or, you know, or to gain that confidence?
She said, how do you get the students to gain this confidence that they're excellent or they're average? A lot of it, you talk about the home piece. A lot of it is also educating the parents sometimes, because a lot of times, especially our students that are first generation, they can't go home and ask their parents, well, tell me what you did in college. They don't have that foundation, they don't have that knowledge or that experience. So if there's somewhere where you can get them onto the campus and get them engaged with somebody else and say, you know, this is what I'm talking about, to build their own background and understanding, to truly develop the learning environment at home. Because a lot of the learning that goes on way before you guys at the university. And that's really going to enhance your development.
I'm going to add to that by saying, sometimes our language or evaluation criteria is not helpful. So even this language of excellent and average, I mean, when you first said that, I thought, again, statistically speaking, most people are average. I mean, that's what average means. And so we've got this whole idea that average is somehow bad. And so there's this, so I think especially with little kids, you get rid of this excellent average language because that's not what we're talking about in terms of instilling confidence. People have different abilities in different areas. And so to think everyone is supposed to be excellent at everything isn't realistic. And then you're stuck with somebody who gets to college and they're used to being affirmed as excellent in everything. And if they're average in something, then that's a confidence shock.
Because it's a shock to the system.
And then it doesn't help people maneuver and find where their gifts are, where they are, you know, more talented, and kind of get directed into the
right.
So I think there's a difference between affirming the person and objectively evaluating particular performances and stuff.
And that feeds perfectly into our tagline: find your passion and find your place. Because a lot of it is your passion, and that's what you're going to enjoy later on. You know.
While in following up to this young lady's conversation, I just happened to be reading an article earlier today, and it talked about the key factors in urban minority male high school success that was detailed in the new study that came talk about the fact that this research team found that consistently high expectations expressed by parents and other family members are among the major factors students in the study attributed to their academic success and college readiness. And so, as you were talking, I was looking at some of the other factors. A desire to escape poverty and having meaningful relationships with caring teachers and other adults in school. Now, that's not rocket science. That's just people being engaged enough with their children or with their students, or teachers being engaged enough with their students to pick up on the fact that a student may be from a lower socioeconomic background, maybe from an urban area, maybe from a rural area. But if you imbue success towards those students will probably do better than they would if they weren't getting that positive reinforcement. And so that's all compounded. Our sociologists back here, if you've got folks who grow up in a low socioeconomic area, grow up in a deprived area, all these adverse social impacts are going to complicate or decrease the possibility of these students getting that positive reinforcement, which may make them successful. And so it just resonated with me when you asked that question. I had just read some findings from that particular study. I said, and then I reflect back on mine growing up here in Springfield, and when I watched the cartoon, I must say, the Bugs Bunny, I was offended by that. I mean, and when I was a kid growing up, I probably saw that and laughed at it. But I'm an Ozarkian, but that cartoon bothered me, and there were some stereotypes, barefoot. I know a lot of folks that grew up in rural areas, and everybody wasn't running around barefoot with beards. Be that as it may, So those sorts of things, I think we have to start to engage and embrace and understand. There's really solutions to some of the challenges that are facing our young people. One of the other things I'll say this on close. I taught here at Missouri State 3, 4, 5 years ago, and what I found from students was many students, when they got it in situations where there was an authoritarian figure who may have been misspeaking or making statements, or there was something that was said in class that was particularly offensive, a lot of students who were from diverse backgrounds would simply slide back and not say anything, but be hurt and offended. Instead of challenging that professor or challenging that student in a civil way, because that is where your learning is going to come. The fact that you and me are different will allow me to grow when I engage you in a conversation. And it might be a little bit uncomfortable, but those ground rules that Juan talked about, I think, are really something that we need to do more of in engaging one another. Because I see people stepping back instead of stepping into the opportunity to grow and to learn. And it's right, it happens on this campus more than I like to realize. I'm done.
Anybody else? Well, it's a good opportunity for us to share. That's how we start, that's how we evolve. The communication is very important. A good open forum, yes.
Years ago, probably 10 years ago, we had a big meeting of anyone who was interested in increasing diversity, getting people, faculty, staff, students from different cultural groups, faith groups, racial, and so on. So we're all in this meeting, and they asked if you wanted to say anything or any questions, and one lady raised her hand, and she says, we were talking about Wiccans, there's a Wiccan group on campus, and she said that they were weird. And I just froze. These are people who are interested in increasing diversity, and yet somebody different than her is weird. We have to learn how to use those words to think ahead.
Think more inclusively, yes, that's true. That's right, yes.
I think that would have helped, at least in my education and other people in our generation, is if through K-12, it seems like bullying was almost encouraged by faculty and teachers. And I think that taught a lot of us that that's okay, we didn't make that.
open communication. We went out no scratch. So Eli, we're at oh, yeah, good. Yes.
What resources are available on campus if you weren't comfortable telling your boss or your professor, I feel uncomfortable with that, or I think that's wrong? What resources are there available where we could contact your office and there could be some education going out? You know, something like, hey, did you the seminar?
Unless you call it your name.
I've been waiting.
Our Vice President for Diversity and Inclusion.
Okay.
So what process could somebody follow?
I'm sorry, what process?
What process could somebody on campus follow if they felt they would like to maybe raise a concern or suggest a topic for discussion?
If you want to do a series, a part of this series, we have a committee for this group. And it would just be as simple as submitting that series or that topic and what you'd like to cover. And we can make it part of our Shattering the Silences series, because the series is designed for the campus and for us to do exactly what we're doing now, having dialogue that's both educational and motivational, so that people can not only learn how stereotypes in this case come to be, but how to handle them when they're afflicted upon us, or that we find ourselves doing it to someone else, or and more importantly, we want to know, we want this series to represent a community-based activism where people can take the information and go back to your respective units and apply that information. So when you submit your content, it should say what you want people to get out of it and how you would like to apply or present that information. And the committee will do its work, and you could be up just like Juan is right now.
Come on down. That's a good question. One question right there.
I was just going back to your comment about bullying. Just from your perspective, what did you see? Did you say your teachers encouraged it?
Yeah, like, I was in a mostly Caucasian school, so we had maybe a couple students each class that were of different backgrounds, and it just seemed like they got picked on more. The teacher would go along with it, he started the shows, made you feel uncomfortable if you didn't laugh along with it, you were excluded if you weren't kind of part of that. So it's kind of like almost like an authoritarian power kicker, something like that. I don't know exactly what was going on there, but I felt like as a, as one of the top rated school districts in Missouri, I was really let down by that.
I guess every school is different. I've been a teacher in a public school, and at least now, when I've been a teacher, it's not like that at all. You can't really stereotype all teachers. That's something that's totally not tolerated by myself or my coworkers. So that's something that takes up to do. I mean, certain teachers, but you can't generalize.
Oh yeah, I wasn't ready for all this, but that was definitely problematic in my school. And I even spoke to people about it.
Oh, was that here?
No. It was like K-12.
Oh, okay.
I had my experience being at the university.
Yeah. And that demographic change is hitting them right now. So they're also going through a transition process on that development piece of really developing that inclusive environment. And you're right, because if there's only a few students that are from a different background, they tend to be singled out and say, okay, well, tell me what this means to you. It's like, this is my opinion. I don't represent the whole Latino community or the African American community. So that's also a very dangerous place to put that student or that person. It could be a professional setting as well.
I was just a young lady who talked about how do you I guess, address some of those issues. And I don't know, maybe it's just me, but you know, if someone misspeaks or says something that appears to be racist or sexist, or you know, someone has to say something about that. I mean, you simply have to address it. It's like the anti-racism training that it's not enough for me not to be a racist. I have to be an anti-racist. And so if someone says something that's derogatory towards anyone, then that is something that you can't be tolerated. And sometimes people do it unintentionally. Sometimes, as you saw from the presentation, you know, your environment, the way you grew up, what you were processed, the implied bias, 95% of your bias is created, and you're not even aware that it's happening. But when you are aware that someone has misspoken, you should confront that. And you should do it civilly, tactfully, and address it. Because otherwise, some people are left to feel that that is acceptable. And then there are other students or other people who are sitting back watching and observing that nobody is addressing a particular issue that was particularly offensive for whatever reason. And there's lots of reasons, because diversity is not just race. It's the group individuals, it's the individual and group social differences we all bring to the pursuit of learning. And so, but you have to be willing to address it. And I think what disturbs me with students, and I grew up a long time ago, you can tell from this gray in my hair, but it was, young people were willing to at least speak up. Some of my students told me a story the night that Obama was elected the first time. And they said they had known these classmates and students for 2 and 3 and 4 years, but when he was elected, they said some of their friends went just base. They became derogatory. They made statements about Obama being a monkey, being a nigger, being this, being that, and they were these whites, and they were just totally shocked. But they didn't say anything about it. They didn't address it. And those stereotypes are not just related to Obama or African Americans, but we know and you hear probably on a daily basis some people making statements that are simply not right. And unless you have the courage to address it, unless you have the willingness to address it, you don't have to get in a fight. But if it's not appropriate, it's not appropriate. If it's offensive, it's offensive. And I just think that, you know, this is just, you can't leave here today and say, I got some diversity training for an hour. If you're interested in these sorts of things, we are trying to establish affinity groups, networking groups where we can have these conversations and perhaps try to, equip one another with the tools that you need to engage people in an intelligent way so that we minimize those types of things that are happening, because you know as well as I do that they are happening. Am I right? Everybody? Show me. How right am I? Who is it? All right, that's all I need to know. So we got work to do.
A couple more questions and then we'll wrap it up.
My question is about if there is something that happens in the classroom that's a challenge to the student, would you advocate the student talk to the professor personally and using tactical and try and resolve it that way? Now, say that results in a disciplinary action by the professor. Yes, sir.
Then that's retaliation, and you come to see me.
I know that's right.
Compliance officer.
Because that is sometimes, I mean, not only do they have to overcome the fact that it's professor-student, but sometimes there is a disciplinary or vindictiveness about it. So that's why I want to bring it out, is there's somewhere to go for that.
You know, there's another alternative as well, and that is we have a hotline where people can report things anonymously. And that goes to our internal auditor and our general counsel, and every single hotline item gets followed up on. And so if it was a faculty member that was behaving in that way, that would be referred to the provost's office. It may ultimately go to Wes's office, and so it would be investigated even if the person, for legitimate reasons, didn't want to put their name by that. follow up 100% of the time on any kind of complaint like that, whether it's anonymous or whether it's, if you give your name and you go talk to our equal opportunity officer.
Oh, sorry. I turned this way.
I'm going back to what you were saying about if you see something, say something, basically. I was in a situation where, and this was shortly after the public affairs conference, and I had been in a session where they talked about white privilege and how a lot of white people don't get how racist they are, they don't understand it. And so after that, there was an African-American woman in our office who was making comments about white people this, white people that, and I felt that it was offensive to me because I thought it doesn't feel any better to be stereotyped because of your race, your color, where you're from, than it does for me than it does for her. But I didn't feel like I could say anything about it because I felt like if I did, I would be invalidating her experience with racism. So in that case, what do you do in a situation like that? When someone is clearly saying things that are, to me, were incorrect, but to her they may have been 100% true, and that may have been her experience.
Right, but was she talking directly to you, or was she just sort of spouting off?
She was talking, we had an open office, and she was talking to the group in general.
I would suggest, that's offensive, that hurts my feelings, you categorize me. However, I would like to have a conversation with you about what your experiences have been and why you feel that way. And see, that's, sometimes you start breaking down those barriers. And then that person may see that what she said can be construed as offensive. And sometimes people just like to vent, they just like to get it out. One time in working in government, we used to listen to constituents and they would complain, and a lot of times they just wanted to talk and get it out. And then you could get to the nature of their problem. But, sometimes you have to, work with individuals to allow them to vent and get things out. But, you should have been honest with her. Said, I feel badly because you're characterizing me. You're sort of accusing me of what you're accusing me of, but you're doing the same thing that you're accusing me of. And then it gives you an opportunity maybe to engage that person, and you can have to talk about their life experiences or whatever. But you might understand her better. It doesn't make it any less offensive. But sometimes you just have to, just be human about it. Sometimes we laugh and joke and you're not funny. Or we say things that are offensive, but just be human about it. Say, hey, look, you're hurting my feelings with this. I don't feel that I treat you like that. I want to understand you, but by the same token, you're offensive and inappropriate. We're all adults.
Make it a teachable moment. Yeah. It all depends on how you approach that person. Because then, if they're aggressive, if you didn't, what do you mean? It's that simple. Just the way you pose the word to that person, where you just have to explain to me what you mean. Oh, okay. Because I understood it this way. That way they see that their perception is a different perspective that you're getting. And that way you can really have that courageous conversation that we talk about. And that's the reason we're doing all these series, is really to get us thinking, how do we communicate that way? How do we make it really where it's functional, where I can ask that question and not be afraid? The corporate side's way ahead of us. I've done corporate training, and they use a technique that's called ouch. Because if somebody says something offensive, they say ouch. We know ouch refers to pain, but it's not physical pain, it's an emotional thing. And there's a different series of steps that you go through, but it's really developing it into a positive communication to make a better situation and have a better environment for everybody in the organization. So, we got time for one more, and we got to go. You? Sure.
I know that you were talking about the hotline. I've never heard of that hotline before. Where can students go to find information like that if they have a complaint?
For the president, for the hotline?
Say again?
Where do the